This is the YOB ConvoCast, one-on-one conversations with your other brother's authors, community members, supporters, and friends.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home. When I'm with you, I'm right where I belong. I'm already home.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to the YOB ConvoCast, conversations with our beloved Your Other Brothers community. My name is Tom. I'm the co-founder, editor of YOB, and we're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. And we're in a series this summer called At Home. We spend over half of our lives at home. And my big thought for this summer is to reach out to a diverse number of members in our community and explore how their living situation intersects with their faith, with their sexuality, with their masculinity, how it impacts their day-to-day lives in those areas. And just to see all the different life stages and living situations represented in our community. Not all of them, but a good snapshot of them, I would say. And when I was conjuring up this series, when it was suggested, and when we figured out that this is what we were going to do this summer, I knew that there was one person I definitely wanted to go to because he's talked about his living situation in the past. I've visited him and I talked about my visit to his living situation on a previous podcast, which will be linked in the show notes. But I wanted to explicitly focus on that topic with him today, get all the nitty gritty details, all the ins and outs, all the highs and lows, and one of my favorite voices out there. It's our other brother, Marshall. What's up, Marshall?
Hey, Tom. Good to hear from you. Good to talk to you.
Good to hear from you, talk to you again, Marshall. It's been too long. I'm pretty sure like the retreat last year would have been the last time that I got to connect with you. It makes me sad that I don't want to just connect with you at retreats and podcast recordings, but that's kind of how it is sometimes.
Yeah, well, my life has gotten busy. Well, it's always been busy, but just lately my job in particular has just taken so much of my time that I haven't always been there talking casually the way I would like to more people.
You know, no pressure or anything, but I always love it when you make a rare Marshall sighting on our Discord server, because every once in a while you'll pop in there with a comment or a prayer request or an affirmation for somebody or something. Yeah, and it's just always great whenever you have the time to pop over there. But I know you keep busy. You keep busy with your job, but you also keep busy, I imagine, with your living situation.
Yes, very definitely.
So last time we talked with Matt, who lives with, count 'em, one other person. And I think you're about as far on the other end of that spectrum as we're going to get on this series. I would be shocked if we find somebody in this series that's living with more people than you are. Marshall, give us the approximate tally. I don't know if you know the exact number, but what is the approximate tally of humans living on the property that you call home?
Probably 23 right now, I believe.
23.
Yes.
That's crazy. That is a lot of people. And you've briefly mentioned it in the past. Like I said at the top, I visited you. It's been a couple years now, but I visited you on your property and you gave me the grand tour. And so, like I said, the episode will be linked, but why don't you catch up all the listeners in case they forgot or if they are hearing you for the first time? Like, how would you describe your living situation? Like, what does that mean? You live with 23 people. Like, what is that?
Well, I don't live in the same room with 23 people, that's for sure.
Thankfully.
What happens is there's a 20-acre farm. Some of it is woods, but 20 acres total. And on those 20 acres, there are that many people, 23 right now, I believe. And there's one main house, and that's where I live, along with several others in the main house. And then there are a lot of people that have RVs that are on the farm in different locations. There's, some people would actually have what you would call a more official tiny house. Other people have just a plain old RV that you pull behind a truck. But we all wanted to live together in a way where we could, learn to live out the Christian life, care for each other, and, learn to do farming, things like that. but yet we also realize that we don't want to be just an authoritarian group that is run by one person. It's nothing like that. It's just a lot of people wanting to cooperate.
Yeah, and so it's so interesting because I remember walking with you through the woods. We saw your main house, and then we walked through the woods. We see some cabins, RV. I think I described it as like commune adjacent or something. It kind of has that vibe, not in a negative sense, just like there's a lot of people living in lots of different types of living situations, whether it's cabins, RVs, tiny houses, the main house, bedrooms in the main house, like as just a diverse array of humans living together. You've got a farm. I remember like goats and steer and who knows what other animals. Any new animals to the farm to add to the mix?
Just the same. A lot of sheep mostly right now. But we do have a few goats. We're talking about actually starting to milk the goats next spring. We haven't been doing that. But then we've got, like I said, like you mentioned, we had a steer that has been slaughtered and eaten.
R.I.P.
Yeah, well, it was time. We've tested different things, and it's just, unless you have more acres than we do, it doesn't work well to have a lot of cattle. It just, you got to feed them hay, and it works better if the smaller animals that can graze on the property. So that's what we have been doing. As far as other things, you will see a lot of dogs also. They're pets. Everybody's got a pet, it seems like, a dog. So that's one thing that anybody notices that comes over to the house or whatever. There are a lot of dogs.
It was cool. It was cool to visit. I mean, because it's not your typical living situation. How long have you been there now? How many years?
5 years.
5 years. Yeah. I would love to learn your journey getting to this farm and getting to this living situation, because we're going to spend the rest of the episode talking about it, the highs and lows, the joys and challenges of living where you live now. But you're a single man. How old are you now, Marshall? Or how old are you, if you don't want to reveal your actual age?
No, I'll give my age. I'm 65.
65, single, living here for the last 5 years. Like, it's funny because I was thinking about the contrast. As of now, we've only done one of these conversations, and the other one was with Matt. And Matt's story is so concise because he said he went to college, and then immediately after college, like 15 years of living by himself. And then it's only been in the last 4 years that he's shared a house with other people. And so his story, a lot more concise as far as the journey getting to where he is now. And so I imagine, by virtue of at least 2 more decades than Matt, and maybe 3 with some of our other guests, 3 or 4 maybe even with some of our other guests in this series, I imagine you've lived a few more places.
Yes.
You have more seasons of your life to go through. So I don't know. I'm curious, just over the last 50 years, whatever it's been, like, I just would like to hear, just the journey of getting to where you are. If other living situations and life stages stand out to you to share with the listeners.
Well, when I was growing up, of course, I just lived with my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, in a typical house in the suburbs. Well, it was Orlando, but I don't know if you would call that suburbs, but it was suburbs of at that time, smaller town. And then I went away to college, University of Florida. Was there for several years. I got involved in a church there, and most of the time when I was in college, and then for 1 or 2 years after college, I lived with roommates that were also in the same church with me. And that worked very well for me. I really enjoyed that, appreciated that. I had 1 or 2 times where I was briefly living alone, in between certain people moving in, certain people moving out. And I literally hated living alone. So I realized, well, I don't need to. We could get into the just the singleness aspect of my life here, but I was, thinking I would probably remain single long term. So I really valued friendships and was, I found that some of the best friendships that I developed were from people I lived with. So I kept doing that. When I was about 25, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area. And I've lived where I live now is in the general area. And I've lived around here for most of that time. There was about a 2-year period where I lived in San Diego and a few months where I was caring for my father when he was sick in Florida. But most of my life since I was 25, I've lived here around the Washington, D.C. area. And I've mostly lived with other single men, the vast majority of them straight. There have been a few other guys that I've lived with that also deal with same-sex attraction. But the vast majority have been straight. I've, built many friendships that way. And, what we would do often was just rent a house together. Later on, I owned a house in, closer in the suburbs in DC, and then people lived with me, other guys, usually 3, 4 at once, basically one per bedroom, and that seemed to work pretty well. But what ended up happening, eventually, as I got older, I was living with much younger people because in general, if you have, quite a few straight friends and everything, they all get married and you end up with newer friends that are, still single. So anyway, I've ended up, just getting to know a lot of different people that way. And what we did, I could describe one house after another who was there, what the dynamics were, but it was always good in the long run. Of course, there are always challenges, which we can talk about, but it was worth it to me, and I could see that. And then, back about 5 years ago, this opportunity came up to buy this place. The former owner basically was offering it for sale. As it had been a horse farm, and when I heard about it and several of my friends that were actually living with me heard about it, we said, hey, can we work this out? And I realized that could be done. I won't go into all the financial details and everything, but we decided, yeah, we'll buy it together. And two of us, my one friend that you've heard me mention before, James, he and I bought it together, and we ended up moving here, and then brought with us a lot of the people that were the guys that were currently living there. But then there was a house full of girls that we were very good friends with. Many of them moved onto the property also, and we've continued to live together. There have been different changes. Obviously, James got married. His wife, basically, he and his wife are in the master bedroom of the main house, and I'm in the basement. There are several people in other bedrooms that are largely single, mostly single guys, but there are 1 or 2 single girls, and they're around age 30, most people. There's several married couples that live in RVs or tiny homes. That's been a real journey to get there too. I've definitely had an adjustment, but a good kind of adjustment that I really love, actually. Just being around children. There are a lot of, children under 10 years old, probably 5 on the property right now. There are 3 different, let me think. 3 different married couples that have children.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a very different life than what I had been living, but a good kind of life.
Yeah, you summed it up really well, because that was my concern with the conversation was like, oh my gosh, Marshall's probably lived a million different places, because even in the time that I've known you, I know that you've lived like 5 or 6 different places at least or something, going back the last, decade and a half now. I think I've known you for almost 20 years. We're getting close to that. And so thanks for summing that up pretty well. I am curious, like, it seems like you learned pretty early on, like, yeah, living alone is not for me. And I find that fascinating. That essentially then ever since that moment of realization, you've been living with people and intentional to live with other people.
Yes, that's exactly right. I've chosen to do it that way. And there are others that want to do the same. Certainly it helps financially, but more than that, people do want to have a closer friendship with others and not just be so independent in life that you don't have anybody that knows what's really happening with you.
Yeah. I'm curious, because you mentioned it briefly, like as you're getting older and as you're remaining single, like was there ever moments of, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, did you feel self-conscious or did you feel, like we talked with Matt last time about optics? Like, I don't know who you lived with or what the age range was. Like if you were in your 40s and they were in their 20s, or if you were in your 50s and they were in their 30s, or I don't know. I'm curious, like what the dynamic was as being, that's just the reality of it. As if the older you get and you remain single, the options for living with other single men are going to probably skew younger and younger the older you get. And there might be scenarios where there's other older people your age that are also single, but I'm curious if that was concerning to you or did it make you feel self-conscious as the friends your age got married along the way? Like, what was that like as you aged and as you found these roommates?
Well, I mean, of course it's, I understand that it looks weird to some people that are looking at it from the outside. But I had to decide a long time ago that I'm not going to allow others' perception of me, whether people, look down on me or whatever. I would not allow that to make my choices for me. I consider other people definitely, but I don't want to, just conform to what everybody in society conforms to just because they're doing it. I guess I've been more of an independent thinker in some ways.
You're a trailblazer, basically.
Thanks.
Is what you're saying.
Well, I want to be a type of trailblazer.
I mean, it's cool because I think it's a lot of people. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I think about that. I think about, do I want to be in my mid 40s, mid 50s, mid 60s and still living by myself? I'm not sure. We'll see. There are pros and cons to living alone, and I'll talk about that later in the series. But yeah, I just admire you for recognizing that, nope, living alone, not for me. I need other people around, and that you've found all these people along the way across various living situations. And now you're in this farm, which just seems like you're so, I mean, am I wrong? Are you so at peace where you are now? Do you love where you live?
Yes, I very much love it here.
It's the vibe I've gotten the last couple of years of knowing you, is that you seem very happy there. What's the demographics there? Are you the oldest person there? Or is there anyone close to your age? You mentioned some children and married couples.
Yeah, I am the oldest here, as far as I know. There's one other person. Let's see, she's about 61 who lives here. Long story about that, but that's kind of a new thing for us, and but that's worked well for her. But other than her, the average age here is somewhere around 30, 35. Mm-hmm. And so it's, there's a big age difference, but I've always tended to get along well with younger people. And, nobody has big problems with the age difference. If, you're just talking about a friendship, it's been a good situation for me. Absolutely.
Age is just a number, right? That's all.
Well,
that's all it is.
No, there are things that go along with it. There's baggage, and then there are advantages. But it's it can easily work, and you don't have to make it a yes or no thing where it's a deal killer or whatever when it comes to choosing a roommate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to definitely nitpick and try to explore what the ins and outs of this living situation are.
Sure.
But before I get to that, I want to go back to your first home. So growing up and having these parents, like, I'm curious, like, how would you sum up your childhood, and how would you describe like your childhood home, your adolescent home? Like what was the vibe growing up in the home that you had?
Well, my parents were very much Christians. We would, in general, go to church every Sunday, but more than that, my father especially would really talk about principles from the Bible. He would read to us from the Bible regularly, probably for a while there was every day. And so I was definitely raised in a very, very Christian house. We were, I was always close to my father. I certainly appreciated growing up. I can't remember anything that I would call anything seriously negative. It was just a very good experience as a child. I mean, my parents were strict, as many Christian parents are, but they weren't controlling, especially they weren't trying to control me after I became an adult, which I really always appreciated that. So, I would say I had a happy childhood. And again, I appreciated my brother and my sister also. I felt like I learned to get along with others that are, different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say that my sister has a very strong personality. So does my father. So did my father. My father passed away. And so I definitely know that you can't treat everybody as if they have my personality, which is not a super strong personality. I'm a more, whatever you want to call it.
Mellow Marshall.
I've been my brother used to use that.
Marshmallow.
Oh, yes.
Oh my
yes.
gosh.
Have
you heard that?
I've heard it many times, especially as a child. You can see how they would get that.
I literally have never even conceived of that until right this moment. Marshmallow. Oh my gosh. That is brilliant.
Never knew that.
No, I mean, and it fits you because you are as mellow as they come
yes.
in all the best ways. Like you just have a peaceful presence about you.
Oh, thank you.
Marshmallow.
But yes, I've been, and then there are double meanings there too about overweight, white.
No, I definitely don't want to insinuate.
I know.
That was totally positive.
People have definitely used that nickname more than once. And I could give other nicknames, which I'll let people figure out, but I've been called certain nicknames often. Yes.
Wow. How does your current home reflect the home that you grew up in? Like in what ways is where you live now reflect how you grew up or how does it deviate from the way that you grew up?
Well, one way that it's the same is, of course, most of the people here, in fact, pretty much everybody here is a Christian, a believer, and we openly talk about our faith. Not everyone goes to the same church, but everyone, is serious about their faith. And that's one of the big similarities. Another one is just that we're not distant from each other. We actually talk about things that matter, in our personal lives, other than our faith also. And it was that way at my house. I mean, it was, I think growing up, most families are that way. You will at least, have friendly family conversations all the time. And that's pretty much what we have here. But as far as differences go, well, of course, because everyone here is an adult, and everyone, with one or two exceptions, is working away from the house. There's some people that have remote jobs that there are like one or two that actually work staying here on the property. But other than them, like I said, everyone's away. So there's a lot less direct contact than what you would have in a traditional family. Because everybody is doing whatever they're doing during the day, then they come home and there's not much time to talk. We usually have one big meal together Sunday nights, and maybe once a month we'll extend that meal like hours to have an actual meeting. So everyone on the property stays and talks through positives and negatives that are going on. And it really is not all a negative thing. It is positive. People talk about what they appreciate, that kind of thing. But of course, you'd have a lot more interaction like that in a traditional family, all throughout the week and during the day. Whereas for me, it's just, well, I'll certainly have interaction with, you know, the guy that's in the room across the hall in the basement from me. I will talk to him a whole lot more than I would some others. But then, you catch up with everybody. You run into people all the time and end up in what seems like small talk conversations, but is really relationship building. And so that's what I really love, is when you can get involved in other people's lives. And when they're having problems, you're there to help. I could go on and on about that, but that comes naturally to me. I'm the kind of person that I don't like just feeling useless and alone and isolated. I love feeling needed. And, in this situation I am, I do feel needed. Mm-hmm. Makes a big difference. It's part of what they would refer to as an Enneagram 2 typical pattern.
A two's paradise, where you can be needed in a farm full of humans. I love the intentionality, because I feel like that place lends to a certain personality that people probably aren't going to just live there with like a nonchalant attitude. Like, my thought would be, like, if you are living on that property with 22 other people, that you actually want to be there and you want to participate in what's going on. And so I imagine it draws a certain type of personality that, of course there's going to be diversity of people there, but I think it's going to probably draw a lot of people. And I'm even curious, like, there's probably people listening now that are like, oh my gosh, especially if I think the Lord is leading me into singleness for the rest of my life, or a good chunk of my life. Like, man, how do I get into a situation like that, where I know that there's going to be 20, 30 people around, and that I don't have to live alone for the rest of my life? Like, I imagine there's some listening that are really intrigued and really enthusiastic, maybe even, about such an opportunity or such a possibility, that something like this exists in the Washington, D.C. area. It could exist elsewhere. And it does, I'm sure, exist elsewhere. Big properties with lots of people and different cabins, RVs, tiny houses, etc. That whole setup. I want to learn about more of just like the logistics. You mentioned like weekly meals or monthly meetings. Just what are some other, just before we start getting into the joys and challenges of your living situation, like, what are just the flat out logistics? Like, how does this place work? How do you make this place work as somebody in a leadership position there?
Well, basically it's structured as James and I own the place and everybody else rents from us. That's the legal structure of it.
Okay.
But it's so we have, an organization that was at one time nonprofit, and now we're allowed to make a profit, but our intention is not to make a profit. We're not meant to be a rental property that makes a profit for the landlord. What we're trying to do is help others. And so we whenever there's extra money, it basically gets spent on either expanding or repairing things, which there are always needs there. Or, sometimes we're helping start some of the farming businesses that people are doing. But we have it arranged so that not just people are there paying rent, but they can take some of the property and use it for the purpose of some business of their own, where, they can make a living that way if they would like to do it like that. We've had people work as a mechanic from there, and then of course a lot of farming things. So, people have their own individual businesses. It's not a common purse, so to speak, except for the fact that everyone's paying rent to the same people. But it goes into an organization that is to help all of us.
So that's the logistics, the finances. What about just like the personalities? Like getting, I imagine this is not a utopia where nobody argues, nobody fights, where people don't have opinions. I'm assuming that, I don't know. Well, tell me, like, how do you handle conflict, or how do you handle decision making, or how do you handle just like, I don't know, all that goes, things that married couples struggle with when there's only 2 people, 3 people in a house. Like how do decisions get made, or how do conflicts get settled when there's 23 people living on a property?
Right. Well, we started out just democratic. In other words, whenever there was a conflict, we'd all meet together and just, everyone would share their side, and then we would just vote on the answer. That sounds good on paper, but it didn't work well. We ended up not being able to accomplish long-term goals, and it actually literally inspired more fighting. And we decided, no, that's not the way to do it. So we talked through with everybody. People could see that there was a lack in moving forward. That we needed to have goals and whatever. And so we decided to have 3 of us lead. And then, we presented it to everybody, and everybody did vote democratically that, yeah, we'll change the way we're governed. And they voted to have, there always be 3 of us that are making the decisions, that we all have to talk and come to a consensus before we move forward. And there's, right now it's James, me, and another Matt, another one of the people who live here. We have deliberately chosen to have 3 so that there's always a tiebreaker. But what we don't want is, what we've always tried to avoid, is one person being 100% in charge and being like a dictator, because that has so many problems of its own that we've chosen not to go there. So when it comes to resolving a problem, the 3 of us will talk about it if we see an argument going on, or someone not doing well and we have to help them or whatever. There are many kinds of situations. We'll talk it through between the 3 of us. We'll decide what to do. And then, of course, we take this to God and we pray. It's not just deciding based on pure logic. We care for people, and there's compassion, and, but still we have to make a decision, and we do. And then, normally we're not going to be harsh with people, but when people are being destructive, then yes, you have to be harsh to deal with the problems. And so we've learned to, when to be tough and when to be gentle. And some of that is always a subjective thing. But I would say certainly James and I and Matt, to a large degree, have a strong friendship where we know we're not going to be angry and dividing against each other. So we can help the others, hopefully by showing a good example.
That is beautiful. What a little nice triumvirate. Do you guys have a name for your little leadership group? Feel free to just use the triumvirate.
No, we haven't said triumvirate. We do have, it's sort of a good relationship among all the people. You can't count on that to carry you through all the problems, but it helps a lot if there's a general care for each other, commitment, desire to be positive toward each other. And there is that among almost everybody there. And so that when there is a dispute, most people want to resolve it. I could tell a few stories. I mean, one time, I hope I'm not going too far here, but there was one married couple they were newlyweds. They had been married for maybe, 6 months or so. And they just were having a lover's quarrel, whatever you want to call it. And one of their friends was also living on our property, another couple that they were very close friends with. they came over and tried to help the couple that was angry at each other. And anyway, so this other couple that came over to gently help, the husband actually got punched in the face. It was bad. And so everybody calmed down. And then they talked it through. Of course, because of my inexperience with marriage, I'm no marriage counselor. I wasn't involved in that. But there were those that were good at marriage counseling that kind of jumped in there. And
I wasn't going to ask if anyone's been punched on your property, but now you've answered that question. So that's true.
Yep, somebody got punched.
I mean, it's inevitable that something would happen.
But it was
like that eventually.
These are great people. If you knew them, you wouldn't believe that had happened, because they're not that kind of people. They're not the stereotype. But anyway, it was definitely settled. They talked it through. That same couple is doing very well right now. And like I said, if you came here, you wouldn't be able to tell who that was because they're doing so well.
Nice. Well, you started talking a little bit about limitations or potential challenges of living there. And so I'd love to wind down the conversation with talking about both the joys and the challenges of living where you live and being in this life stage. How where you live now, how that interfaces with your faith, with your sexuality, with your masculinity. I love this phrase "at home" because obviously as a writer, like I just love things with double meanings. And so when I came up with this title for this series, like obviously we're talking about your physical home and where you live, and we've done a lot of that already here today, but kind of thinking more existentially, metaphorically, where do you feel at home, or where do you feel like, I'm convinced even in your amazing situation, which sounds mostly amazing. Like, I know it's not perfect, and I know the only perfect home we're all going to have as believers is going to be on the other side of death, and that's just the way it's going to be. But I mean, I am curious from an earthly standpoint, how at home do you feel in those three arenas that we focus on?
Okay, well, when it comes to, I can start with my faith. I definitely feel at home. I take being a Christian very seriously. It's not just a side issue in my life. It's the whole thing. I mean, I have made most of my decisions, my major decisions in life, because that's what I would believe would most glorify God and most help others, following the two great commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. I feel very much at home with that. I feel like I'm doing that by where I live, what I do in general. So that's one thing. When it comes to masculinity, I definitely feel at home with being a man, and it definitely makes me feel masculine. Some of the stuff that goes on. If you would see how I spend some of my time, climbing on top of storage containers, installing solar panels, wiring, opening an electrical panels, shocking myself.
I imagine your know-how has increased a lot, and you were always like somebody that you drive a stick, and you have some basic skills that I think a lot of men today probably don't have, just by virtue of the changing times. But I imagine living on a property like that you've gained a lot of skills that are quote unquote masculine.
Yeah, I was surprised, but I mean, I have literally accumulated tools in the last 5 years that I never had my whole life. I had no reason to have much of a toolbox or anything, and now I do. All these home improvement type stuff. Suddenly, I'm interested in getting all this. It was that is a big change. That is a big change, and it makes you feel masculine in a sense. I've driven a tractor, all kind of things.
Wow. I've never driven a tractor. That's impressive. How do you feel? Do you find yourself comparing? I'm a comparer. I don't know if you're a comparer, but do you compare yourself to the other men that live on your property, mostly younger, probably stronger or whatever, just by virtue of their youth and their, and just their stage of life? Like, do you find yourself comparing yourself, or not so much? Where are you at as far as that?
Well, I mean, I do notice the differences, of course. But
Hmm.
I just had a conversation with one of the guys. He's married. He has a child. Anyway, but he lives on the property. I was just talking to him the other day, and I was mentioning the fact that, well, at age 65, with my knee and my back, whatever, I can't carry bigger than a 100-watt solar panel up to the top of this one roof. And he was saying, well, if you need help, I am willing to do the physical labor for you if you feel like you're putting yourself at risk. And I thanked him because people have that attitude. The other guys have that attitude. They recognize that, as I'm getting older, there's a more physical limitations, and they're willing to help me do things that I can't do. And so there's a sense of comparison. It's obvious that some of these guys can do a whole lot more than I can physically, but they're willing to do it because they care.
Does that make you feel self-conscious, or do you appreciate their help, or maybe both?
Um, it makes me more appreciate their help. As far
Okay.
as feeling self-conscious, every once in a while, that hits me that, oh yeah, I'm a little weird here, but that's okay. I'm not trying to be, just conform to societal norms. I'm not.
Hmm.
So I guess I've given that up long ago. If I look weird, as long as people can see God's love being expressed in the way I approach things,
Yeah.
I think that's what matters.
I've learned in my own journey with masculinity. I'm involved in a men's group here in Asheville, and it's just crazy. Sometimes there are things that I think are so specific to me or specific to guys in YOB, but yet it's quite common. Like the concept of asking for help, which, like, I distinctly remember a group I was in, and the question was posed: do you struggle with asking for help? And pretty much every hand went up. It's like, that's something that I struggle with. It's something that other men struggle with. Like, if I am physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever the category is, incapable of doing something, like, then I need to ask for help in order to get that task accomplished, or in order to move forward. And that creates a sense of inferiority, or it could create a sense of inferiority, or a sense of lack, or a sense of I'm not man enough, or not as man as this person over here. But I've been reassured, and I need to constantly be reassured that, it's okay to ask for help. And it's actually quite, masculine, for lack of a better word, I think, to recognize your limits and to recognize your capacity for what you can do as a one-man show, and recognizing that we're all wired to need each other to some end. And I think it's a great point of maturity if you can get to that point of learning to ask for help and appreciating that help without feeling, within reason, of not being a needy person and just being a leech on people and never doing anything for yourself. But that definitely isn't the vibe that I get from you after all that you've done for just buying the property to begin with James. You've certainly poured in a lot to this property and to this community. And so that's awesome that you can receive help as well for all that you've put into it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been quite like I said, there are all kind of feelings you have inside, but I always try to, even though I have very strong feelings, I try to look at the whole picture and not just do a quick emotional response and base a decision on just a fleeting emotional response. I try to look at everything. And when it comes to, ooh, I feel awkward because I'm, 20 years older than everybody else. That's an emotional response. But then you look at the whole picture and you realize, no, this is better. And sometimes it's just a matter of considering everything. But the one thing I guess we didn't talk about so much is sexuality, which is kind of important.
I was going to ask, because I know you and James are very close, and that he's aware of your story, and he's been a great support to you. I am curious though about beyond him. Like, how open are you, or how open do you want to be, or do you feel like you could be or need to be?
Yeah, well, there is help, certainly from James. I've told many people in the house, and I've said this is no secret that I deal with same-sex attraction. This is something that, well, I've explained my perspective. And I've said, this is not confidential. You can tell anybody. It's not gossip. It's okay. Tell, So pretty much everybody knows, even if I haven't personally told them. They understand too that I put my relationship with God first, and that's why I'm, choosing not to be in a situation where I'm having sex with men. that would be sinful, wrong, according to, God's commandment. So what I do is, I will talk through just temptation in general. If I'm having a spiritual conversation with someone, I don't need to get specific sometimes because they understand what the specifics are. But sometimes you can get specific. And one thing that I actually was feeling the need to have somebody that really understood a lot more of what you go through in sexual temptation when you're dealing with same-sex attraction. I just wanted to have more of somebody like that close to me, but at the moment, for a long time there wasn't. Well, one of the guys who moved into the house is definitely dealing with same-sex attraction. He hasn't told anyone else in the house.
Okay.
But he's told me. And of course, I don't think anybody would listen to the podcast from the house, but if they do, we'll let them try to figure out who that guy is. Anyway.
Yeah, let's instigate some things. But as it stands, you feel like you're safe. You don't feel threatened. You don't feel like judged or given special treatment or anything like that. You feel like you're as welcome as anyone else there. Yes,
I do.
Good.
No question. And so does this other guy who I, again, won't give too many hints about. He and I have had some very serious conversations lately. As soon as he moved in, I pretty much knew what was going on. It was clear to me. He told me, maybe a month after he moved in, and I could tell that he was surprised that I recognized, somehow he didn't realize I dealt with same-sex attraction. I don't know why. But we talked thoroughly about it. And as is usually the case, if there's another guy that's a Christian that deals with same-sex attraction, there's kind of an instant bond there. You understand each other very well. And that sort of happened. And that was good. And no, we've talked in great depth, not just about that, but about the way he grew up, the emotional difficulties of that, how he's had to overcome depression, other things. It's been
That's really
good.
Great.
Yeah, so like I said, it's a blessing to have a friend that understands me on a level that other people may not. That's been a good thing around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to have like a little subset of the community that you can connect with on a whole other level. And
I think God provided that. I really do. The fact that we both can understand each other and happen to live here right now.
Yeah. Well, Marshall, thank you for your time today. Like, it's cool. And I know we could probably talk for a long time about where you live and the journey you've taken. But I always say this to you and to all of our like 50 plus crowd. Like I think it's such a beautiful part of our community that we have people who are further along, both in age, but also in life experience, and being able to continue to follow Jesus wherever they live. So again, whether it's living with friends and roommates, one or two, or living with a married couple, or living in a property with 20 plus people around you, like, it's been inspiring to me to just watch you over the last decade and a half and just seeing you hop around from all these different living situations and to a place where you are now, where it just feels like you're thriving. You're 65, and I feel like you're just still blooming, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. That growth still happens at any age, and that maturity continues to ripen as you go. So it's cool to see. I'm glad you're part of the community, and definitely looking forward to seeing you at that retreat here before too long.
Oh, I look forward to it too. And hopefully I'll be on Discord a little more often.
Yeah, I know. Pop on Discord. We miss you. We miss you on Discord.
Right.
Listeners, if you're curious about Marshall, and I know you are, leave a comment on our podcast episode page. Just go to yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, find Marshall's At Home episode on the ConvoCast page, and leave a comment, ask a question about living on a commune. I'm going to keep jokingly referring to your living situation as a commune, even though that's such a negative connotation that you would not use. I think farm. You're just on a farm. Is that a good neutral word to use?
Yes. We have heard all kinds of things here. Probably the most funny, but not funny, was that people referred to it as Jamestown.
Jamestown. That's funny.
Instead of Jonestown. I don't know if you've heard of Jonestown. There's a
no, I've heard of Jamestown.
Okay,
I've heard of
Jamestown,
as
Virginia.
in Virginia.
There is an ancient, well, let's just say I believe it was the 1970s, there was a terrible tragedy in a cult that was known as Jonestown.
Okay.
You can look it up online.
So there is a cultish connotation. That's what you were going for.
The cultish connotation was, because of the name of the cult being Jonestown, someone said, "Oh, that's Jamestown."
Gotcha. I will look that up now. I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued.
It was a horrible disaster. You don't want to see all the pictures. It was bad stuff.
Yeah.
We're not that.
Good. You're a positive version of that. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking about it. It's always good to connect with you, Marshmallow. And I'm so glad we get to connect every once in a while. Everybody stay tuned. Next time we'll talk to someone else in a unique living situation and life stage and learn what their life is like. And I can't wait. I can't wait for the series to continue rolling on. Thanks, Marshall. It's always good to have you.
Yes. I really appreciate you having me here too, Tom. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Until we gather at home once again.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home.
James has a phrase. What does he like to use? He said something about anyway, he talks about the leader of the 10 or something. I forget. He has some, I forget if it's a quote from the movie Sparta, the movie 300. Anyway, there's some quote that he uses it. To be honest, I forget exactly.
I guarantee you, actually, I don't know if I guarantee you nobody listening has watched that movie, because I've never seen it, but my visual is there's a lot of mostly naked men wandering around in that movie, because it's just like naked, shiny, muscly men in that movie. So I'm actually quite positive that some people in our community have watched that, even though maybe the theme is more on battle and war and not like Mean Girls. Although Mean Girls includes battles and wars as well, just of a different sort.
Type. Yes,
not quite 300.
Yeah, but anyway, James had he's of course seen the movie like 3 times or something, and he had some quote from there. I can't remember it off the top of my head, because admittedly someone did make me sit down and watch the movie. I watched it once, but anyway, it was.
So you've seen it.
Yeah, but anyway, as far as it goes, though,